Great job. So last week we began looking at a well-known parable in Luke 15. I'm not going to read it all again tonight, but it's the parable of the Prodigal Son. And although we should call it the parable of the Father, because it's actually centered on who the Father is, what he's doing. And so we're going to, last week, just to let you know, we talked about the Father's love. We saw that God is, from this parable, he's loving, can be trusted, that he's looking for us, he's looking for you from a long way off. He's the God who runs to us, he's forgiving, and he intervenes, he reestablishes us in him. And we get to the end of that parable, and we read about an older brother. I'm deliberately leaving the younger brother till last, because I don't know, I was at a wedding yesterday, and it was lovely, and the best men, they weren't really best men in that sense, but the brother of the groom and the brother of the bride both gave speeches, right? And they're both younger than their siblings, and they basically talked about being bullied their whole life. And so that was really interesting, because I have an older brother, and I say he bullied me basically all of my life. And so if you're a younger sibling here, if you're the last one in your family, you know, I feel your pain. If you're an older sibling, you pity. And we're going to look at the older one tonight. We're going to look at the bully. We're going to talk a little bit about the bully brother tonight. And so I'm just going to read from verse 28 here in the parable in Luke 15. It says, the older brother, now remember what's going on, the younger one's returned, the father's throwing a party, he's killed the fatted calf, much to the fatted calf's disappointment. And so the older brother gets home, and this is what the read says, the older brother became angry and refused to go into this party. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never even gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. When this son of yours, who squandered all your property, your money and everything else, on wild living and ladies of ill repute and all this stuff, when he comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours, but we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. This brother, this older brother, is Mr. Angry. I don't know if you've ever read the Mr. Men by Roger Hargreaves. Has ever come across that? Get thumbs up for those. So, and he is Mr. Angry. He's angry with everyone. Who's he angry with? He's angry with his younger brother. And I think some of you might find his anger justifiable. You might say, well, actually, I get why he's angry. You see, the younger brother leaves. He's wished his father was dead. But that means that the older brother has to work harder than he's ever had to work before in his life. Because the work in the land, in the farm, everything else is not shared anymore. He's shouldering a bigger responsibility. And the other brother apparently doesn't seem in the very beginning to care much about that. So the older brother is left to carry it all. Now, I don't know about you, but I've been around church a long time, and I know that people from time to time leave churches. And they do that for all kinds of reasons. There might be good reasons, there may not be such good reasons, but ultimately, some people might think that churches, there's a nicer church down the road or whatever, or I prefer that pastor's jokes or whatever it may be. But it sometimes means the rest of us have to pick up the work. These the rest of us who are left have to work a bit harder. And that can lead to resentment. I don't know if where you work or your situation is, at college or uni or wherever you are, but if you've got a slacker in the team, have you ever had a slacker in your team at work? How annoying is that? Right? How annoying is that? Because everyone else ends up making up for what they're not doing. And I can remember when I was doing my undergrad degree, millennia ago, it feels like, and I was doing it, and they introduced this thing at the time, group work, and you had to do these projects together, and you had to do those kind of things together. And I would get so annoyed, because I would really put in hours on this stuff, I'd really put the effort and everything else. And you'd have, there might be 5 or 6 of us working on this particular project. You'd always have one person, and it was always the same person in the class, always the same one, who you knew was just going to turn up on the day of the presentation or our course meeting and go, I didn't have time, I didn't do it. And so you have to do something off the cuff, and you have to do it. And the worst thing about it is that exercise was graded. It counted towards my degree. Do you remember these things, Elim? Was it like your time? No, you were the slacker, were you? Is that what? So I don't remember it because I never joined in any of that kid. And so I used to get really annoyed. I remember taking one guy aside and saying, you're gonna make me miss my first. You're gonna make me miss my first because you're slacking. Well, he's like, I don't care, as long as I get through. I said, no, I don't want you to get through because you're not doing any work. And I was being an older brother. I was being a bit of a bully about it because I was getting so annoyed about it. And when people are like that around us, and even when they're like that in church, we can end up with a backlog of resentment and anger towards them. We can end up resenting them. And then one day, and I've been in church one time, so I can tell you about this kind of thing happens. One day they come swanning back into church, years later, months later, whatever, and they come and they sit in the seat that you've been sitting in for the last several months, the seat that Jesus died for you to sit in, I don't know, and they sit in that seat like nothing's happened, like it's all fine. And everyone's fawning over them and saying, oh, it's so lovely to see you and all that. And but inside, you're ready to pop on one. In love, of course, Christian love. So what we do is we bottle that judgment and anger up. We don't say much about it. But unfortunately, see, the problem in the older brother is this. He thinks he's better than the younger brother. It's not about what the younger brother's done. It's not about him or the fact he's left it. We're not told in the parable. It could have been months or even years. We don't know. It's not about that. The older brother actually thinks he's better than the younger one. And it's that older brother attitude that we can't really have in church. We can't really have that as Christians. Can't maintain it. We can't keep it. In fact, the Bible tells us, and Jesus told us, you have to forgive, and you have to forgive really, really quickly. He tells us in Matthew 7, do not judge, or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will also be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You are a hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's. I think it is, we can't ask God for mercy for ourselves and judgment for others. We can't ask God for mercy for ourselves and judgment for others. We can't make them pay for their sins, but ask God to forgive us our sins. You might say, Keith, you know what that person did to me. You know what that person said to me. You don't know the offence they caused me. You don't know how deep that run in my life. I don't know. You're quite right. And we could compare war wounds. There's, and I don't know if some of you guys are old enough to remember this, but there was this film series called Lethal Weapon. You're loving this Mr. Lethal Weapon. It's on point, isn't it? Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, all that kind of thing. And he was a bit mental. And there was this scene, I think it was in Lethal Weapon 3, I'm open for correction here on my accuracy of my preaching, you understand. But I think it was in Lethal Weapon 3, the character Riggs had got himself a girlfriend, and he was talking about how many times he had been shot. And she was like, but I've been shot lots and lots of times. And you don't see anything untoward in the scene, don't worry, I'm going to go like that. But they can't show each other scars. Well, what was that? Oh, that was that time when I did that drug. Or what was that? Oh, that was this thing. And they're comparing their war wounds, trying to show that the other one has taken more hits than the other person. And we can be so much like that in church, can't we? We can be a little bit like, you don't understand how many times I've been shot. And the issue is how many times you've been shot. The issue is how many times can you find it yourself to forgive? How many times can you show the love of God to someone who maybe repeatedly is hurting you? Don't sit in anger. But then we discovered that this guy, his older brother, he's also angry with the father. And this would be a bit of a shock to the listeners, because by now they've picked up the father in this story is God. And then Jesus continues, and actually this guy's angry with God. Don't know if you've ever been angry with God. Don't know if you've ever had a few choice words to say to God. And you might say, Keith, we're much better Christians than you, because of course we've never, ever been angry with God, because we're super Christians. I've been angry with God. There have been times when the unexplained has happened, and I'm like, God, what are you doing? Why are you allowing it to happen? If you read through the Psalms, about 30% of the Psalms are the Mr. Angry Psalms. They're the Psalms that are saying, God, how long are you going to let the evil prosper? How long is it going to be before you intervene? How long will it be? This older brother turns round to the God figure in this and says, you are not there. Wow. That's an accusation, isn't it? That's an accusation. And I love the fact that the Bible is so honest, and Jesus is honest about what is going on here. So he points out to the father, this is the comparison thing where he thinks he's a bit better than the younger brother. He says, I've never disobeyed you. Never disobeyed you. I've been faithful. I've been here day and night. I have worked, and you haven't even given me a young goat so that I can have a barbecue with my mates. Not one thing have you ever given me. And he says, that young one over there, what he's been doing, what he's wasted, what he's squandered, what he's done it with, he comes waltzing home and you kill the fatted calf. Now the fatted calf was, the Jewish families would often fatten up the young calf for a feast, and it would be a planned feast. It wouldn't just be, we're just going to have a fat animal lying around just in case something good happens. They would be planning an event. They would be planning it around festivals, and so every year they would have a fattened calf. And they would be slaughtering this animal, offering as a sacrifice to God. And he takes the sacrifice that's meant for God, and they eat it. I mean, the Jews their toes would have been curling at this. People, oh no, and broken the law. How can they do that? And you're doing all this lavish stuff for this younger boy. And he says this to him, he says, I have been slaving all these years. He gave me nothing. There's a sense of injustice. His view of justice has been upset here. He feels that his father has been unfair to him. I want you to know God doesn't actually have favourites. My kids, and they're growing, they still ask me now. My daughter-in-law's cottoned on to this as well. Because, they've said to me, who's your favourite? Through the years. If you're a parent or grandparent, you've probably had that if you have multiple children or multiple grandchildren. Who's your favourite, Pops? Well, I don't really have a favourite. No. You've got to choose one. You've got to choose, because I'm better than him. I'm better than him. You've got to choose one. I don't really have a favourite. No. And then I hit on this new thing. But it was new about 10 years ago, and I hit on it. And I would say to them, you're my favourite. And then they look, oh, I'm the favourite. Why am I your favourite? Because I'm talking to you now. But tomorrow when I'm talking to the other one, they'll be my favourite because I'm spending a bit of time with them. And so it goes on. My daughter-in-laws, they look at me now and go, yeah, Keith, we know we're your favourite because we're here now and we're having a conversation. We're your favourite. You're my favourite. Yes, you are. They're not really satisfied with that. You understand? They want to be the permanent favourite. But I'm like, I don't know how to elevate one of you up. The older brother felt like the younger brother was the favourite. I know we're not told it here. I think probably the younger brother felt the older brother was the favourite because of something and how God responds to the older son. This is what the father says. In verse 31 it says, my son, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we did have to celebrate and glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Here are three things that the father says to the older brother who is angry, who is bitter, who is resentful, who is struggling with an area. And I want you to know these are the things that God wants to say to you tonight. And as we worship in a few moments, that our response will be in response to these things. The first thing he says to me is, you are always with me. You're always with me. See, God doesn't love you less because he forgives somebody else. Isn't that amazing? Our position in the kingdom, our position in church isn't suddenly undermined because someone is shown forgiveness and shown restoration. Your place is secure because he is with you, which means you're with him. You're always with me. The second thing he says to him in response to this son saying, I worked really hard. I've been like a slave to you. Remember in the parable, the younger son is going back to say, I want to make myself a slave. He hasn't been a slave, says, I want to make myself like a slave. The older one says, I have been a slave. And the father says to him, everything I have is yours. You don't have to work for the things that God has already given you. Oh, that's really good. I thought that might go on name then. Maybe in a Pentecostal church, I don't know. It's a sense in which everything he has is ours. Now, technically, we can say that already happened. The division of property happened already. The split already happened. So literally everything that was left was the son's. And I think God wants us to know tonight, everything that God has for you is yours. We don't have to perform for it. We don't have to work for it. We don't have to do things to get God's favour. He already loves us. Stop saying it. Now, in my mind's eye, slaves are quite miserable. If you want to be a miserable Christian, the option is there. You can be a miserable Christian if you want. You can be the kind of Christian that's forever feeling beaten up by himself and by others for whatever reason. But I want you to know that kind of thing is not necessary. You know, some people will say to me after a sermon, that was the best sermon I've ever heard. Happens rarely, but it does happen. And others will come up to me and say, you really need to try harder, Kane. That was rubbish. That really wasn't so good. You'd be amazed what people say to me after church. It's quite amazing. In fact, now I've told you that, none of you will speak to me directly after church, because everyone will be looking at me, I wonder what they're saying to it, you know. But there's that sense in which my worth is not found in what I do for God. My worth and identity is found in the fact that he loves me. There's nothing else beyond that. There's nothing else to add to that. So the things I do out of gratitude, but not out of slavery. Friends, stop trying to earn God's favour. You already have it. And thirdly, the Father says that and we had to celebrate because he was alive, but now he was dead, but now is alive again. We need to rejoice when the prodigals come home. We need to rejoice when those who have been absent from church or come home and they're like nothing's happened. We need to rejoice and not be left outside of that celebration. You see, this parable is left hanging. Jesus could have ended it with, and the father goes on around the older brother, and they went in and they all had a merry time until, whatever time in the morning, and it was a great feast. He doesn't do that. We're left with the question mark, did he go in? But it ends there. And it ends there because the choice is always going to be ours. Are we going to enter? Are we going to enter? He's never going to force us. And tonight can be quite a special night for a few of us. It could be a night where actually some of that old bitterness and anger against people that have hurt us in many ways is dispelled. So we need to forgive. We need to be able to forgive those who have sinned against us, and they may not even know they've done it. Some things are unintentional and insidious and horrible, and we need to take those to God as well. But in my life, and there's been those who have intentionally sinned against me in one way or another, but most people, and some people that hurt me the most, didn't even know they were doing it. And probably never going to be aware of it. But we still let them go. And we still release it. Because I want to live in the promise that says, everything I have is yours. Everything God has is yours already. And that's good news, is it not? And now we're going to spend some time worshiping in response to that. And as Sam and Aaron come back, I want to remind you of those three things. And you can dwell on them. And we say often we've got lots of space in these settings. We can stay in our chairs, we can go and kneel somewhere, we can walk around at the back just as worship's happening. However you feel comfortable to meet with God, we invite you to do that. We're going to worship, I don't know for how long. God might do all the business through the power of the Holy Spirit in one song, and that would be lovely. Or there might be just that sense that we dwell a little bit longer. But I want to leave these three things for you to think about, meditate on. Son, daughter, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But now we have to celebrate. We have to celebrate. It's good news stuff, this. I don't know, it's brilliant to be a Christian. It's brilliant. Just can't claim any credit for myself. I have to keep going back to God, saying, God, here I am again. He says, welcome back. Can we worship a little? If you feel comfortable sitting, standing, however you feel, let's be with him over these next moments together.